is a U.S. Army Reserve officer and West Point graduate who has put together a pretty amazing YouTube presence since the beginning of this war and has gained more than 250,000 followers now by just putting out short videos explaining why and how of the things that are going on in Ukraine, especially because Preston was an officer for a HIMARS unit, and you know those are a really big deal right now in Ukraine. I got a chance to talk to Preston, have him on the show. Take a listen to our conversation. It was really awesome.
So Preston Stewart, I graduated from West Point 2009, field artillery officer. Went active duty from there, Fort Campbell, 101st Airborne. Went to back and forth to Afghanistan a couple times, 2010, 11, and then again in 2012. Left active duty, eventually moved back into the National Guard down in Texas, where I commanded a HIMARS battery, which when I went artillery, I never wanted to be a part of rockets and missiles. I thought the cool fight was the light guys, 101st, 82nd, 173rd. So I wanted to stay away from HIMARS and MLRS as much as I could. It's kind of funny now to see that that's the big talk, is HIMARS getting all the attention. Anyways, my wife and I live here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, just outside Nashville. We have a small business in town, and she does a lot of the day-to-day with that. I'm more kind of back office, and in turn started making content around things that just that interest me: international relations, military history. And as this war in Ukraine kicked off, I just couldn't look away. World War II is where I've really enjoyed studying, reading, all of that, just as a novice, not as a professional. And it's very, very interesting to watch a conflict, probably the closest conflict to that, maybe since Korea, play out in real time. So I'm taking a lot of my time
reading
it.
Conflict that I've covered in 20 years of doing this job has been an insurgency. It's been, non-traditional. This is the first kind of conventional warfare that has happened in our lifetimes, for sure.
Arrows on a map. Yeah.
Right. And it's so strange to go someplace where if you're outside of 35 kilometers or so from the actual line of contact, you're pretty much safe. There's people out there going to coffee shops and licking ice cream and walking their dogs and stuff. And you wouldn't even hardly know there's a war on. So I really appreciate your content, because you do such a good job of explaining the real arcane nature of the war and of the military and of these different weapon systems and why things work the way they do. But I'm sure you've noticed, I think one of your more recent shorts talked about it, how even if you're just talking about the ranges of different missile systems, half of the comments on your show are going to be people accusing you of shilling for one side or the other, or both. Why do you think that is in this conflict?
It's emotional. We've made it more emotional. I'm not exactly sure why. It seems more, I was in high school when we went into Iraq in 2003. I can't remember. I mean, of course, different period of technology. We didn't have social media. Not everybody could share an opinion. So maybe it was the same. It just wasn't as public. But people are taking some of these sides very, very personally. And I don't mean the majority of these comments, I'm fairly certain are not coming from Ukrainians and Russians, but people, a lot of whom are in the United States, taking a side.
They haven't been there.
Or don't have a direct impact.
Carlson says, or somebody on one side or the other, and trying to formulate their opinions based on those things. How you feel you bring value to the conversation about the war.
I really try to leave opinion out of it, or when it is opinion, make it very clear that, one man's opinion, or this is what I think. There's so much uncertainty. I mean, I'm in Tennessee. I've not been to Ukraine ever, let alone during this conflict. You're on the ground there. You've been on the ground there. There are so many people that have more factual information than I can get my hands on, even if I spend all day diving into it. So I try to step back a little bit towards something like artillery time of flight, or the different ranges of weapon systems, because it doesn't matter if that's in Ukraine or at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. It's going to be relatively consistent. So we can talk about that without overtly getting into supporting one side or the other.
When it comes to HIMARS, we've given Ukraine 16 HIMARS units. I don't think all of them are actually in the field yet. Maybe they've got all 16 of them there now. And Russia has claimed to have destroyed about 100 HIMARS units at this point. And that's not even hyperbole. They've actually claimed to have destroyed. If you add up how many they've claimed to have destroyed,
Sure.
it would have had to have been that many. Why do you think that is? Uh, why do you think it's unlikely that Russia has destroyed a bunch of HIMARS units?
Well, I think they're still being used. We're still seeing the effects of strikes. We're still, and this is one of the challenging parts. You see a video today that shows a HIMARS firing. You and I sitting here, or I should say, I sitting here, I can't tell you if that video was taken today or 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago. So it's very challenging. But the videos that I've seen and the images that I've seen of the supposed destroyed HIMARS, it's not that convincing. And I feel like those are prized pieces. If they were captured 100%, they would be on display. Um, I think it's probable that one or more have been destroyed or at least damaged. They're getting heavily used, and if not damaged, then look, they break down. They're military equipment. Just by driving them to the firing point, sometimes those things break down.
Well,
So,
talk about the range, though. I mean, do you think that they're able to keep them pretty much out of the range of most of Russia's, capability to take them out, or at least to find and fix them?
I don't think the question is range; it's how they're moving around after firing. So, if we're talking 70 or so kilometers of the Gimlers, the guided rocket, which is supposedly the only one we've sent. There's a whole debate around ATACMS, the longer range one. Russia has plenty of stuff, whether it's unguided rockets to short range ballistic missiles to aircraft that could range 70 kilometers from where these HIMARS are impacting. And 70 is kind of the max. So they're probably shooting probably in the 40 to 60 range. You're going to get a lot more accuracy. So Russia has plenty that can range that. It's just a matter of identifying the point. As soon as a HIMARS launches, they can be out of there well before it impacts. And if that's the case, then Russia's going to have a hard time finding those once they're on the move and in what we call a hide site, hiding.
Right, and it seems like, at least from my experience on the ground, that Russia, their precision fires are not actually that precise. When we say precision fires, our stuff, we could put it through a specific window in a specific building. They might be lucky to hit the neighborhood that the building is in, and they call that precision fires. We've seen a ton of stuff that has, I would say, probably 60% of the Russian missile fire and rocket fire that we've taken has not hit a military target that I've gone out and seen personally with my own eyes. Probably 60% has not hit any kind of military target. And most of them aren't even anywhere near. It's not like they hit next door to a military target that they were aiming at. It's like, man, the only strategic or tactical thing that they could have been trying to take out was miles from here. They're nowhere close. Talk about the difference that you've noticed, if you've noticed a difference between the technology that Russia has and what the West is employing through Ukraine. I say we're employing not because we're directly involved, but we are directly involved. And as I've told a lot of people, Ukraine is the football in this contest, and the teams are Russia and the West.
Yeah, the HIMARS is a good starting point there because that's one of the ones getting the most attention when it comes to precision munitions. And we've used those. Again, they're getting a lot of attention now, but those were used Iraq, Afghanistan. I mean, the battery that I commanded before I moved here to Tennessee, they went overseas and were firing those in Syria and Afghanistan in 2017, 18. So they've been heavily used. And one of the reasons they're used is because they can pinpoint a parked car in a driveway and put a rocket essentially through the roof, 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers away. That's serious. We would regularly, a decade ago, when identifying a set of structures that maybe was being used as an IED manufacturing facility, they'd put 5, 6, 7 HIMARS directly into a small courtyard. I mean, just incredible precision for these things. Russia has that capability. They do have the technology, but it doesn't seem like they have it as widespread. You're seeing a lot of unguided rocket systems, which are still devastating. I'd be terrified to be under fire from some of these things.
Horrible.
Yeah, but you're talking about 16 trying to hit a football field size thing, maybe. Football stadium is probably more accurate, as opposed to putting one through the northeast corner where the headquarters building is. There's a value in both at the end of the day, but there's a big difference for sure.
Well, when you see this 4.5-ton missile landing in some poor old woman's garden,
and leaving her without a house, but with a new Olympic-sized swimming pool where her garden used to be. It seems like that to me, that's a really good way to lose a war, because you're sending a multi-million-dollar missile to destroy essentially nothing. And the only thing you've accomplished by that is to take people who might have actually been at some level friendly to your cause, and made them absolute enemies for life by destroying what little they have already. What do you?
I was going to say, I was going to add one thing to the precision munitions there, and I don't think it's perfectly clear yet from our perspective outside of Ukraine. There's multiple pieces to that. There's the target mensuration, identifying a target. So in that example, identifying the Ukrainian headquarters building. If they do that incorrectly, that precision munition may have been perfect, but they listed the grid as that old lady's garden. So there's multiple error points throughout here. And the same goes for HIMARS. If you don't have good targeting with the HIMARS, you can plug in the perfect coordinate, but if that coordinate's wrong, it's going to perfectly strike the wrong location.
So it could go down to training and leadership and things like that.
As well. And I'm pretty sure I've heard a lot about the accuracy of the Russian weapon systems at baseline. So I'm sure that's not helping. But I think it's not, I don't know for certain if that's the only thing, or if the fire support officer out there is calling in the wrong grid, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Very good point. So how do you think this is helping the U.S. military in general by being able to sort of have a laboratory, so to speak, in Ukraine for testing American versus Russian, which we've not really had on a large scale like this for many, many years, decades?
I don't think there's been anything this valuable, in a very cold-hearted realism type view. This is incredible for the U.S. military. We're watching. I mean, they just captured a T-90. You better believe somebody from NATO is going to get their eyes on some pictures, some video, maybe some of that technology, maybe the whole tank at some point. It's one of the newest Russian models. Mm-hmm. It's, we see these tests that Russia and China and North Korea are conducting, Iran are conducting, and it's relatively staged, or these exercises are they're not exact, but now we can actually see what's happening in real life, not just with the Russian systems, which is something in itself, the capabilities and shortfalls, but what some of this NATO equipment is capable of doing on the battlefield. I can't think of anything that would have been this valuable to the United States military and NATO in general. I mean, since the Cold War.
Yeah. No, I'm sure that the guys in the Pentagon have got to be just giddy over this, like you say, from a completely cold-hearted, tactical, strategic point of view, not taking into account the tens of thousands of people who are having their lives destroyed by it.
Of course, yeah.
And I think, at least for me, the reason that I do this, the reason that I keep going back over there, it has nothing to do with the politics of it. You could argue all day long with people about whether or not we should be sending money, whether or not we should be sending. Everybody likes to make that case that, well, there's needs in the United States. Why are we bothering to send billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine, even though a lot of that money that is said to be going to Ukraine is actually going to our allies in the region to encourage them to give their old Soviet stuff to Ukraine and buy new American stuff, which is eventually maybe good for our economy in a way, or at least it's a indirect transfer of America's tax dollars to Boeing and some, DynCorp, some of those guys. But nevertheless, I keep going over there because of the people, because there are people that are hurting, that are having their worst day. And I see that the value that I can bring to this is in telling their stories to the world. And the world can pray about them, can send money to help, can, do the things that people should do, and maybe not governments, right? I'd love to talk to you more about it. And I'd even love to invite you over to Ukraine. Come visit us over there, and we'll take you around. Maybe that'd be a really good time.
That'd be fun. Yeah, absolutely.